Hey, this tournament is a $30 rebuy on WSOP.com in the Nevada. There's multiple WSOP.com options. We're in Nevada here. I live in Vegas. So it's a $30 rebuy. I ended up just into it for $90. The entry, the rebuy, and then the add-on. And things went well, and there were a lot of interesting spots. So I thought we would talk about this one. Now, I nearly max late reg this one. I think there was 10 minutes left in registration when I jumped in, which is something I'll do a lot more often in these rebuy events online than I might do in a freeze out or in a live event, right? I don't want to drive all the way to a casino to play 3 minutes and bust out in a freeze out and go home. But with these rebuys, you're not in as bad a shape with the number of big blinds you get, and the add-on is an extra bonus. If you play a rebuy and you don't get to the add-on period, you've paid more for your chips than everyone else did. So that's part of the consideration for jumping into these. And I move a couple of things around on the screen here. Okay, and here we go. So hand number one, I bought in for the buy-in gave you 7,500 in chips, and I rebuy right away. So I start with 15,000. You can see that this table hasn't been rebuy crazy. So one of the first things that I look at when I'm late regging a tournament like this is what do the stacks look like? And in this case, the stacks are all very reasonable, right? The big stack at the table is only slightly more than twice what I just bought in for, and we're 2 hours in. So these guys have not been going crazy. It's about time to go crazy with 10 minutes left in the rebuy period, but they just haven't been completely nuts, and there's not a mountain of chips here, which means I'm not willing to go completely nuts myself and try to build up a big stack because I just can't. Right? There's not enough chips at the table to do that. So my first hand is uneventful. Doesn't mean anything, but we're going to watch kind of how some of our opponents play. So we see standard, min raise instead of a shove from Golden Dollar, who's going to feature prominently in this tournament. By the way, he's in it deep with us. We see a raise from him in a spot where I might have jammed, but he might think he's got a few too many chips to jam, which might be true. I'm starting the hand with 7,500 and the blind's only 450, so it's close. But if you open here, you can expect to be jammed on a lot, right? So you better only be opening hands that you're willing to play a pot with. Unless for some reason everybody's folding, but I just don't see that. That's just not realistic here. And he gets 3-bet by Mongoose, but it's not a shove, which is weird to me. It makes me wonder, does Mongoose have a big hand, or does Mongoose not know what he's doing? Because I can't come up with many other options here. Not knowing how the table's playing, it's hard to say. And Mongoose could just be, 3-betting and hoping to get shoved on and call it off. But it's a weird 3-bet size given his opponent's stack. This really is probably a fold, flat, or jam kind of spot for most people. But I don't think this play is particularly expensive in terms of negative EV, but it's a weird play, so we want to watch it and see kind of what that means. And we're going to find out, because obviously he's not going to fold to this. So a weird play with King-9 suited. Like, you don't want to encourage people to jam. There's no range where you're like, yes, I finally got, I got him with King-9 suited because I got him to put all his chips in pre-flop. There's no range where you're excited about that. So I think this would have been a flat for me if I was Mongoose here. I just see a flop. This guy's probably never folding. If you jam, you're way behind even his opening range. There's not a range King-9 is in good shape against. So I would have just flatted, see how the flop looks. You'd have gotten this flop and check folded and been done with it and wouldn't have lost much. I'm seeing Golden Dollar open, then call it off with Ace King. That he certainly was opening and hoping that somebody would shove on him, and that's a fine play with Ace King with a stack that size. Try to get all the chips in against the range that you're ahead of. So we're not going to go through every hand of the tournament of this kind of in-depth stuff, but I thought I would look at a few of these early hands with the right before the rebuy period's over, because some people don't understand how this late reg stuff works. You don't have to super late reg something and then just start piling your chips in like crazy. You really don't have to. There's a significant advantage to having a short stack sometimes, and this is a pretty good spot for a short stack. So this is close actually. Like with deep stacks, this is just an insta call, but you don't have to call this like in a freeze out or after the rebuy period. You might fold here. It's such great pot odds. You probably have to call, but it's not maybe as instant as you might think because you're committing a good chunk of the effective stack here. But it's certainly a call in this situation. And that's a reasonable flop. Some people like to bet fold this kind of flop. They kind of feel better. Like I bet this, and then somebody raised me and told me that I was beat because they had a 10 or a better 9. But with all these draws out there, I think that's really a disaster, right? You could fold to you end up folding to a lot of queen jacks and 2 spades and 7/8 and hands like that. So I like in spots like this to just check. I don't like to lead out here, and then I get information by the time it comes back around to me. If it checks through and a king comes on the turn and I have to check fold, that's fine. That's part of the deal. But if there's a bet and a raise, I can fold. And now I know I'm beat, and I didn't have to put any money in to find out. And if there's just a bet, sometimes I get enough information and I get to kind of see a cheap river card. I think this bet is too big. We're typically gonna, in a $30 rebuy on WSOP, we're gonna be playing with amateurs, even if they're good amateurs. And amateurs make this size continuation bet on this flop, which is very non-standard for serious pros. Right? A solver's never making this bet. A serious pro's never making this bet on this board. And when an amateur makes this bigger than expected continuation bet, it usually means they have a hand they don't want to let you see any more cards with. This would be a pretty weird bet with queen jack or with 2 spades. This would just be betting and then planning on calling it off and getting all your chips in with a draw. Whereas this bet to me looks more like it's a 10, or could be an overpair or 10-9 even or something. But it looks like a real hand. So can't call that. And if it is a draw, I'm just not in great shape, and we're getting all the chips in. So let that one go. We'll just do 1 or 2 more hands just to kind of see how this looks, and then we'll go to mostly hands that we played. So this should have been an open jam. The result is still the same, but the result is not the same if this guy has like ace deuce offsuit, right? He might fold, or if he has like king 8 offsuit, he might fold, whereas he might jam on you if he thinks he's got any fold equity. So this should have been an open jam with the stack that he has there. Doesn't really matter how it plays out, but let's watch this happen. And we're seeing action basically every flop, which is not surprising. And getting close to the end of the rebuy period, people really get pretty frisky. Might be worth taking a note that Can I Live 1, 2, 3. He might be stealing some pots and might be aggressive, but there really weren't any other draws that could have missed here. So he probably had the diamonds, or yeah, I can't come up with my. I mean, maybe he would play king queen that way, but it's a weird way to play king queen. Looks like he had the diamonds to me. There's the hand I would have played if it had been folded around to me, but we got a raise under the gun and then a 3-bet. And again, this non-all-in 3-bet. These guys are really playing pots in strange ways. And then to fold to a $500 bet. I mean, even if you've got queens here, even if you've got 9s here, you want to call the 500. And the 500 is a weird bet from Golden Dollar. Really, that's a like please raise me bet most of the time. But I mean, if you have 2 queens here, just call, and you're actually getting odds to chase a queen on the turn, given that you're going to make a bunch more money if you hit it. On average, you're not always going to make more money, but on average, you're going to make a bunch more money if you make the queens fold, and the guy's got ace king or something. So it's a weird fold by Mongoose. Makes you wonder about his 3-betting range or about something in the way he played. And Golden Dollars, his open bet here for 500 is a little strange as well. But given how well it worked, you might wonder if maybe he sees something in Mongoose. Maybe he knows something. So I'm going to skip ahead a bunch of hands and look at some potentially playable hands here. I don't like that very much. The guy with a big stack makes a re-raise, but it's not a shove. I mean, that's like as scary a sizing as you can make. And I have really the wrong hand to play against that range. If you run ace-10 against like a range that includes ace-8 plus and 7s plus, you're getting destroyed. So, that would be an awfully wide range to give him given this. Like, his range is tighter than that, and I'm just in really bad shape. So while I hate to fold a suited ace in this spot, you gotta let it go. And be grateful for the fact that he told you were beat. He was very clear about it and let you get away from that hand. Didn't play that one, and that's good. And then here's so we've blinded away almost half our stack, right? We had 15K. We've folded away and blinded away, like we put in that 1400. We've let a lot of hands go before we get to this point. Now, this is a great setup. I really like this hand as an instructional tool. If I flat here, I'm flatting away such a big chunk of my stack, right? Almost 20% of my stack, and we know from the old 5% rule that you don't put in more than 5% of your stack with a speculative hand. That's not a hard, fast rule. Don't live your life by it, but it doesn't mean you can always put in 4.5%, and it doesn't mean you should never put in 6%, but it's a good thing to know and to remember, right? And we're breaking that by just a huge margin if we flat. And we also just don't have a big hand we can show down. We're like flatting and hoping to flop a set if we do flat here. And we don't have nearly enough chips behind to do that with. We could also fold here, but we're getting very close to the end of the rebuy period, and we don't have any chips. And I think there's value here, right? When we compare folding to shoving, I think there's a real value here. It is possible, maybe it's 5 or 10% of the time, that we shove here and everyone folds. It is possible. Now, in a $10,000 buy-in event live, it's not possible, right? But here, it is. These people might actually do that. Some of these players might actually do that. And it's also possible we rip it in and G Vegas rips it in and gets Mongoose out of there, and we get this extra money in the pot, right? That 1,600 means something to us when it's 20% of our stack. So getting that extra money dead in the pot would be nice. And it's also possible we rip and G Vegas folds, being afraid of Mongoose behind him. Who knows? But a lot of good things can come here from going all in. And then the unexpected happens, but it's also good, is that somebody else provides the isolation right behind us. Now that probably means he has a very strong range, but at least he gets G Vegas and the big blind out, but now we're playing the pot 3 ways because Mongoose calls him. It turns out this is just as good a spot as we can be in. This is beautiful. Now, Mongoose flatted a raise with Jack-10 suited, which is something you might do in a cash game or you might do early on when the blinds are really deep, or the stacks are really deep. But these stacks aren't deep. This is a clear mistake. You can't put in 1,600 of your 20,000 with Jack-10 suited with 3 people left to act. You can't do that as a call and hope to that you're hoping to outflop people, because you're going to end up putting all your chips in here with Jack high in really bad shape. In this case, like, he needs to catch a 10 with no queen and no 7, or he needs to make a straight or a flush, and he's by far the biggest dog in this pot, and I actually have the most equity in this pot. It runs out really scary for me. There's so many bad cards for me here, but that's not one of the bad ones. So win a nice pot here. Now we've got a few chips. Now we have almost doubled our initial starting stack. Now we're at 28,000. So we have almost four buy-ins in front of us. And then I believe the rebuy period ended very soon after this. Here's a hand I did not play, I don't think, but oh yeah, it's offsuit. It's okay. I thought that was suited. And here's the next hand I actually play. And again, there's some spots here, where I don't know the players at the table because this was a week ago. My memory's not great. My brain has lots of processing power and very little memory, and so I don't remember these hands. But I do. Like, I can go through the same thought process in this situation and usually come to the same conclusion. But sometimes I don't know my opponents, and there might have been things happening. Maybe Beat the Champ had been all in 11 times in a row here, and I don't know that. But at the time I did. At the time I would know it. I was only playing 2 tournaments here. I also played like a $50 freeze out or something. And so, if I'm only playing 1 or 2 tournaments, I'm paying attention to the table, and I might know that Beat the Champ's been all in 11 times, and so I should just open rather than shove and possibly get a fold, and he's just going to go all in over top of me. Like, that might affect things. But in general, with aces, we're going to just open here. There's no reason to jam, scare people away. We want people to jam over the top. Pretty easy spot. And notice I didn't jam here either. I'm not at all afraid of my opponent calling. Right? There's no reason for me to be worried. If my opponent has me beat, good for them. They're going to get all my chips, and there is nothing I can do about that. And if I can't affect the pot size when I'm beat, then treat it as if you cannot be beat, as if you have the uncrackable nuts. Since I can't affect the pot size if I'm beat here, I'm just going to pay him off. I might as well make a small bet and try to get hands that are worse than mine to come in, right? Make sure that I get as much value as I can from those hands that are way behind. There's a lot of hands that are in big trouble here. Any one heart hand is in big trouble here. The only hands that are in good shape are a flush, which is very rare, and also, I still have a bunch of outs to beat it, and a set, in which case I also have a bunch of outs to beat it. So, I'm really not worried about that. I'm making a bet here to try to get shoved on or to try to get a call. If I bet here and just get a call, I'm probably going to check almost every turn and try to get it all in on the river. If I get jammed on here, that's great. And that works out perfectly. Now let's look at the hand and think about if I jammed, was I getting a call here? And this might be the perfect hand to illustrate. If I jammed, this Money Arcade might have folded, drawing very nearly dead, right? With just 2 outs to catch a 6 that's not a heart, and then to fade all the 2 pair and heart outs that I have on the next street. Money Arcade is like well less than 10% to win this pot, so I would hate to have them fold. We want that money in there. And if I jammed, they might have folded. So this is a good reason why I bet small on this particular board with this particular hand. Right? If I had 2 black aces here, a jam might have been better, because then I'm a lot more vulnerable. And then obviously it goes well. The next hand that I play, and I was going to actually stream this tournament. It was going to be my first big live stream. I was going to stream that day, and I decided, no, I'll do a little more testing, and I won't stream this one. And I wish I had streamed this one because it was a really good tournament. I don't usually limp the small blind. It's pretty rare, but sometimes when I think I can get away with it, I will. And in this case, I must have thought, Can I Live 1, 2, 3 is going to let me do this, but they're also going to defend if I open. And if I open to 4,000 and they defend, then I got to bet, 2,000 on the flop, and I'm going to get called there a lot. And then suddenly I've invested like 6 or 7,000. You know, I put 20% of my stack in there, screwing around with 8 high on a flop I missed. So that might have been my thinking, and it might have also been just a feel. You know, if I open here, I'm going to get called or shoved down a lot, and I just want to see a flop with this hand, and he's going to let me, right? I'm never making this call, this limp, if I think my opponent's going to raise me with any significant frequency, right? If my opponent's going to raise me even like 30% or 40% of the time, I'm not going to make this limp. But I must have thought that I could get away with it, knowing the table dynamic and the player to my left, rather than invest a bunch of my chips here. And then I probably also felt like I could outplay this player after the flop. So, and this is a great flop to bet, because if you missed this flop, your hand is hopeless, right? So if you miss this flop and your hand is hopeless, you'll fold to almost any size bet, because you just know you just don't have a chance. So I have to bet here. And then the fact that my hand is also completely hopeless is another reason to bet here, because I don't mind being raised off it. If I get raised, I was drawing dead or close to it. And if I get raised, I can fold for, you know, the little bit of money I put in there. So I don't mind being raised off my hand, and I really think I have a reasonable shot to win this pot. So when I bet 1,600, look at the odds that I'm getting, right? I'm getting almost 3-1 on my bet. And my opponent, having a random hand, is going to fold this pot about half or 2/3 of the time. It's probably more like 2/3 of the time. And I only need him to fold around a quarter of the time, right? A third of the time is fine. Since it's 4,800, it would be 3x my bet. I guess it's slightly more than a third of the time. And I'm going to get that many folds, right? I'm going to get him to fold half the time for sure, and I'm probably going to get him to fold 2/3 of the time. Or a random hand has missed this board. So it's a profitable bet, even if my cards are essentially blank here, which they might as well be. And it works out. All right, I'm going to break this video, and I'm going to go make the more in-depth stuff that I'm going to do for my Patreon and for the Rec Poker players, and cover some kind of opponent profiling, take some notes on opponents from hands that I see them play, talk about playing after the rebuy and add-on period is over, which is in the next few hands here, and then go through the rest of the tournament. And then talk about final table play, heads-up play, everything.